Today I'm joined by Tess from All Dressed Up, who's making salad dressings that are shaking up the category. Tess, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on.
To begin, can I ask you what is a salad dressing?
For me, a salad dressing is anything that can be dressed on a grain, a noodle, roasted veg, lettuce leaf, but all dressed up. We're trying to sort of show that salads are so much more than leaves. And we can kind of redefine what salads look like and hopefully get people genuinely excited to eat them.
That sounds amazing. So it's not really a salad dressing, it's more just a sauce.
We very much sit in the salad dressing space, and our whole mission is around unlocking the joy of amazing tasting salads and creating amazing salad content. But yes, for us, what we see as a salad is so much more than, just a dry green leaf. So yeah, we're sort of redefining what salads look like. But yeah, I would say we're very much a dressing rather than a sauce.
Salads for me, I think it's probably my favorite kind of food. I feel like we're living in an amazing time right now where, we've got people like you, but also when you're out and about, there's like artists and honest greens and all the rest of it.
Absolutely. Yeah.
When I think about prepared salad dressings, I see ingredients like emulsifiers and gums and thickeners and stabilizers and acids and all sorts of things. But I feel that All Dressed Up doesn't use any of those.
Yeah, that was always the ethos from the very beginning of setting the brand up. That I was looking at a lot of pre-bought salad dressings and felt that they had ingredients in them that either I didn't recognize or that didn't need to be in there. So I wanted to create a dressing that was kind of as similar to as a homemade dressing as possible. So we use all natural preservatives, things like oil, vinegar, tamari. They all have like long shelf life and they're all natural preservatives. So everything you can find in All Dressed Up is all ingredients that you should be able to find in your store cupboard at home.
It still seems to have quite a long shelf life. Like, how do you manage to do that?
Yeah, so all of our current range has got a 12-month shelf life on it. So we use ingredients that just naturally do have a longer shelf life. So we use, things like honey, mustard, vinegar, tamari, miso. They're all things like the natural core ingredient that like has a long shelf life naturally. But we don't need to add any like extra preservatives or additives to increase the shelf life.
And does pH come into it?
Yeah, pH also comes into it. So we have to hit a certain pH in order to make sure that they're shelf stable. So that was kind of when we were developing them right at the beginning. That's kind of one of the first indicators you'll look at, as well as the ingredients you're using. You'll look at the pH to indicate whether or not the shelf life will be there.
For a product that seems so natural, do you find that you're selling to people who they like to cook themselves and so they're buying something prepared to speed up their life?
Yeah, we tend to find people who are buying into All Dressed Up are people who are foodies. They do love like new flavors, they love cooking, but they might be short on time and just want more of a convenient product. So we really like to think that our consumers and customers are people who make a great homemade salad dressing, but actually All Dressed Up is as good, if not better, than the one they can make at home. And it's in a convenient squeezy bottle, and the flavors are already balanced and pre-measured, so they're just saving time. We also have customers who might not feel as confident in the kitchen, like balancing flavors like miso and sesame and like finding the right blend and feel like more confident to just use a pre-made solution like All Dressed Up. So tend to find we have two customers, like one who is already making them but wants the time saving, and the other one who just like doesn't have the confidence and wants a pre-made solution.
There's so many ingredients that aren't in your recipes. Have you had to think really hard about that, or did you just grow up not using, let's say, ultra processed foods and that kind of thing?
Yeah, I grew up on a farm. My dad's a farmer, and my mum's an amazing cook. And we always ate kind of, whole foods. It wasn't like we were ever restricted from eating anything. And we weren't not allowed sweets or anything, but we very much like grew up on a really kind of healthy diet with, good, like well sourced protein, veg, not too kind of complex, over processed carbohydrates. And that was always how my mum cooked. And I guess I've taken a lot of my like cooking style from her. So yeah, we didn't have, obviously there's a time and a place where sometimes you need to have foods that are quick and easy and they might happen to be very processed, but it wasn't a diet that I kind of grew up eating. So it's very much kind of, yeah, the ethos that I've taken into my cooking style, moving kind of, yeah, into my career in food.
Did you come up with the recipes yourself, or did you have maybe family members giving you a helping hand or anything?
So all the recipes were developed by me. The everyday house is actually based on my mum's house dressing. So that's really close to the one we had at home and kind of grew up eating. And then the other three that are currently in the range are all ones that I developed at home. Naturally, you do a lot of focus groups, you do a lot of feedback. I would take small bottles in my handbag to friends and family and anyone who would try them to kind of feedback on flavor and taste. But yeah, they're all developed by me.
I guess in the beginning you were making the dressings at home, but at some point you outsourced production. Did you have to change the recipes at all when you did that?
Slightly, obviously, the factory samples you get by nature will be slightly different to the samples that you're making at home by nature of like the raw ingredient being different. So it might be that, we increase the lime percentage by a bit, or the first tahini sample we tried wasn't quite right. But yeah, the factory made samples now are still very, very close to the samples that I made whilst making them in my kitchen.
Could you notice a difference in the flavor at all, or was it seamless?
Yeah, definitely at the beginning, like the flavors, if you compared them kind of side by side, I guess because I was very close to what they tasted like, tasted different. So then I would go to the factory and be tasting the samples that we were making kind of together so that it was easier for me to be like, this needs more honey, or this needs more salt, or this is too vinegary. And then you can kind of make those amendments live and make it as close as possible to the original.
Are you still able to work with the manufacturer and say, look, this is the kind of oil that I want to use. These are the ingredients I want sourced.
Yeah, they do the ingredient sourcing for us, but we can have a say in terms of what ingredients we want to use and what flavor profiles that we want to make sure it tastes similar to based on like home development.
And is it really important to you to stay away from using additives? Like in the future, do you think you'll keep the recipes as clean as possible?
Yeah, definitely. I think, it's one of the brand values that we have. And I think I've always taken the approach that if you don't need to add an additive, then it's often just there as a filler. And we really want the dressings to just be based on ingredients that you can find in your store cupboard. And they taste like they're homemade. And yeah, I can't see a world where we'll be adding a lot of additives.
Yeah, that's so good. I wish more people were like that. Do you think you'll ever do a mayo?
Mayo's not on our pipeline at the moment. I know that there are a lot of flavored mayos out there, but yeah, it's probably not something I can see us doing in the near future.
Yeah, I imagine it's kind of difficult as well. Um, it's creamy, rich eggs. It's kind of a jump, isn't it, from what your current range is?
Yeah, I think it probably doesn't fit so much into kind of like health as much as like salad dressing does. I think the usage isn't as clear. Um, and yeah, it's probably just not an area that I think is kind of really like ripe for disruption, or it's already been done really well. So yeah, not to say that there aren't lots of delicious flavored mayos out there. There are. But yeah, it's not a category that I imagine we would be kind of jumping into.
So in the beginning, who were your first customers and how did you find them?
So at the very beginning, it was just friends and family because I set the business up in December 2023. So we were just selling to friends and family as, Christmas stocking fillers. And then it's sort of, yeah, kind of the momentum has gone past that. So now it's no longer just friends and family, but we went from, yeah, friends and family from Instagram and word of mouth to farm shops, delis, independents, then won listings in the likes of Bailey and Sage and Whole Foods. So we had quite strong momentum in kind of the London boutique independent farm shop deli space. And then from there kind of went on to win nationwide distribution, working with wholesalers like Cotswold Fair. And also we went on to Ocado of January 2025. And then since then have won distribution in Waitrose, Co-op and Boots.
That is literally amazing in such a
Thank you.
short amount of time as well. How did you find it to get those the first, I'm going to say big retailers, but I mean people like Whole Foods and then
Mhm.
Ocado. Are they really difficult to get into?
I think we had a product which they found exciting kind of from the get-go. I'd worked in the FMCG space previously, and so I knew it was difficult to get the attention of like the Whole Foods buyer, for example, because they're managing so many different categories and products. But I think, we timed it well. We went in at a time of kind of spring. where there wasn't anything really in the category existing that was playing the role that All Dressed Up was. So, I think for them, they saw it as kind of something new and exciting, but it was easy to understand. It wasn't like we were creating a new category like oat milk was. But it was something that easy to recognize that kind of was ripe for disruption. And there wasn't really a premium player in the space. So, of course, we definitely had lots of no's, but also had quite a lot of yeses, which really kind of helped with that retail momentum.
If you had experience in FMCG, were there things that you'd expected to go okay, but actually were really difficult?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely have never had any experience, setting up a business from scratch. I've worked in a few different roles within FMCG, sales, tiny bit of marketing, product development. But, it's a whole different ball game when you're suddenly, a one-man band and setting up a brand and you're responsible for branding and marketing and sales and ops and finance and supply chain. I think there's been so many things along the way from setting it up that I just went in kind of completely blind in many ways. But the great thing is about setting up a business is that you do learn because you're the only one at the beginning to kind of do the learning. So I'm really grateful now that we're further along, that I had exposure of all parts of the business at a relatively sustainable growth phase, so that I could kind of get my head around most of it.
And do you see yourself as a disruptor?
It's a good question. Not probably by nature, um, but I think what we're doing is not necessarily disrupting a category. I think we're just injecting kind of joy and personality and flavor and innovation into what has been a very dusty, boring category. Salad dressing aisles was not an aisle of the supermarkets that I was even shopping. And I obviously now spend quite a lot of time in those aisles. So to an extent, I see us as a challenger. Whether I'd go as far to say we're a disruptor, I'm not sure, but I definitely think we're innovating what has been a pretty dusty space.
Do you at any point want to sell out, or is the idea to stay independent and keep growing as far as you
I
can?
think when you launch a business, and we're still so young, the business has only been really running properly for a year, and it's only been, 9 months since I've gone full time in the business. You're not really thinking about exit. You're just thinking, what can I do to kind of get the brand in the best possible position to be able to make an informed decision about that later down the line. So yeah, the focus really right now is to stay independent and to really grow the brand and awareness as much as we can.
The growth that you seem to have had is literally amazing. Where do you see growth coming from looking forward?
We've grown really quickly in the retail space. So we've sort of spoken about the momentum so far. And so that's been really promising and encouraging from kind of a data perspective. And I think there's a lot more retail channels that we can kind of go after when the time is right. But I think, there's lots of other channels that we haven't really even explored yet. There's, food service, there's export, there's recipe boxes, there's different avenues that I think at the right time we will explore, but you don't want to try and do everything, I think, kind of too quickly, too early on.
Yeah. Yeah. And I know direct to consumer looks really good on paper, but is that something you'd ever want to really focus on?
So we do a bit of D2C. About 10% of our business comes through D2C, and we see it as a really kind of good awareness channel. It's a great way for people to trial the dressings and actually like get product in people's hands. But I think, I've worked for recipe subscription boxes, so I kind of get the D2C model and how that works in terms of people buying weekly, monthly, bi-monthly. And I think by nature, salad dressing is more of a retail product than a D2C product. But whilst we're still really early on, as long as, we're profitable within the first order, then I think it's a great kind of way of raising awareness.
Having been in some meetings with national grocers myself, I know they have a lot of power with their suppliers. Are Ocado better to work with or easier to work with?
Ocado were the first kind of major to really take a chance on us. And we've seen amazing growth with that account. I mean, yes, by nature, you have to invest with Ocado because it's a media platform and visibility is everything. But they've got great kind of things in place, like their Roots program is fantastic at supporting challenger brands. And they support more challenger brands than any other retailer because they've obviously got this more space to do so. So yeah, I think, you have to go into it with your eyes wide open, and know that it's something that you've got to invest with and make kind of sensible decisions of how much you're willing to invest and sort of see in return. But I would also say that they have a really great platform, especially within your first year of trading, to make sure that you're on, good terms, and they really do try and support those challenger brands coming through.
What kind of things do you have to do? Are you out there sampling, or are you talking about more digital marketing?
I would say more digital. So I think with Ocado, the just key is visibility. They've got so many products online, and if you're not easy to find for a customer, then you're not probably going to perform particularly well. So I think the key is understanding the metrics that you can use to make sure that when people are looking at salad, then all dressed up is coming up, and so that you've got that cross trade purchase, and that's super visible.
In terms of pricing, I know all dressed up is nearer the higher end. Has that ever been difficult for you? Because I know a lot of brands who really struggle at a higher price point. They really have to educate the customer, and it's really sluggish for them.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely something that was probably more difficult when we first launched because, as you say, we were like very much at the premium end of the category. A lot of dressings sat at the kind of two, three, max four price point, and we sat at the six, 650 price point. And I think buyers were skeptical whether it would sell at a higher price point. But I think, what's exciting about food and drink at the moment, and what so many other brands have done so fantastically, is they've come in and yeah, you might call it disrupted, you might call it premiumized, but they've come into categories and shown that people are willing to trade up and spend more on better quality, more exciting products, whether that's cereal or tin water or beans or pasta. People have shown that there is an opportunity there, because people want better. People are checking back a pack. People want to buy into brands. People want to buy from people. And when you're a small brand, then that has to come at a more expensive cost because it is just so much more expensive to bring the products to market. So yeah, I definitely think they were skeptical when we first launched, but I think based on performance and kind of how well the brand seems to be performing in the retail space, we've definitely proven that there is a demand there for something at more of the premium end of the category.
How did you do that? Was it done on sampling and people tasting it and realizing that actually it was worth buying it?
Yeah, I think it's just, building blocks. It's proof of concept. It's, creating a case study and then being able to present that onto buyers in similar settings. So when we first launched, we had the proof of concept of, just your farm shop or your independent or your deli and, good senses of rate of sale there. And then you're able to present that to a farm shop and deli out of London and kind of get that proof of concept. And then, we won the likes of Whole Foods and Bailey and Sage quickly, and you can kind of create that case study. And then it moves on to Ocado and then Waitrose. And I think it's just always proving that when you sit on shelf that you are worthy of that space and that, people are willing to try and buy your product.
I think about the middle of the last century, people spent 40% of disposable income on food, and now
Mm.
it's somewhere between 10 and 20%. So
Mm.
people are spending less now, but I'm not sure it's getting them better food, maybe more accessible food and more volume of food, but not
Yeah.
necessarily food that's actually really good and nutrient rich and good for you.
Yeah. And I think people are, savvy. People are looking at the best deals that they can find. But what we always say at All Dressed Up is yes, we are more expensive, but it means that we can elevate people's salads from home. So, I think the likes of Attis, the Salad Project, Urban Greens are fantastic. And I'm a consumer of those myself, but they're 14.50 for a pre-bought, pre-made salad. And actually, if I'm organized, then I will make my salad at home and I'll take a bottle of All Dressed Up to work. And then it seems like a much more affordable, cost savvy solution.
Yeah. Have you been to Honest Greens or HG?
I haven't been to Honest Greens actually, no.
Okay. Okay. I think you're probably really close.
I will go and check them out.
I think they are doing something really interesting that I think is going to shake up the category. It really shows what a salad can be.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'll definitely go on your recommendation.
On that note, is there like a dream collaboration that you would have in mind with another brand?
we've actually got a collaboration coming out in the next couple of months, which is sort of top secret at the moment, but we're really excited about with a restaurant chain. So that is, yeah, like our first ever collaboration and something that we are, yeah, really, really excited about. They're a bigger brand than us in terms of kind of just brand profile, and their chef is really renowned and, yeah, a huge kind of idol of mine. So that's really exciting. I mean, there are the obvious ones, you see the likes of the Bulding and Vetivo collaborations with Ottolenghi. I would love to develop a satay dressing with someone like Pip and Nut. There's brands that I've always admired and would love to do a collaboration with as and when it would fit in terms of right time.
Well, I'm looking forward to seeing what that is. I've got a
Uh,
feeling it's going to be delicious.
Thank you.
When you first started, were you thinking about branding at all? That like brand values, design and voice and tone, that kind of thing?
Yeah, no, I always had kind of brand in mind. Obviously, the product needed to speak for itself and it needed to be delicious to want people to try it in the first place. But I think brands are, you know, as important. And I've worked for some really fantastic brands. So I've worked for the Coconut Collaborative, I've worked for Sipsmith, I've worked for brands that really resonate with people and people have a real sense of like loyalty too. And so in creating All Dressed Up, it was really important to me to create a brand that created a community and that when people bought into All Dressed Up, they felt something. I'd never set up a brand before, so it's really easy to say you want to create the next Pip and Nut. It's much harder to actually like bring it to life from scratch with very little. But yeah, it was definitely important to me to create a brand, and I'm someone who buys into brands, especially within food and drink.
Yeah.
And lots of people I speak to seem to, when they've come across All Dressed Up, I'm not saying it's the best brand in the world by any means, but it seems to have a brand impact on how people kind of talk about it or talk to their friends about it. And there's still a lot of work that we need to do in order to kind of, get that brand messaging out there and our mission clearer and build our community. But yeah, 100% brand is super important and something that I really value and really want to make sure that we get right.
Yeah. And you've been crowdfunded, is that right?
We raised through SEIS last year. So yeah, we did a fundraise which enabled me to go full time. And we brought on a few different FMCG investors during that raise.
That must really help build a community as well, though.
Yeah, I think it does definitely. Like bringing on kind of experts who have done it before is fantastic. But we built a community very publicly. So I had an Instagram account and I involved people in terms of like what our bottles would look like, what our labels would look like, what our colors would look like, what our slogan was. So our community was very much being built as the brand was being built. And I think that hopefully means that lots of people feel like they helped to build All Dressed Up because I was doing it very much publicly on a poll. I was saying, what do you guys think of this font versus this font or this bottle versus this bottle? And it's very easy to just click. And it's amazing how many people do. And it's free market data. So, lots of brand experts would say that is not how you should create a brand. But I also think I would argue that it's a great way of building a community.
Yeah, absolutely. That involvement from people is really going to go a long way.
Hmm.
And I love how it says made by Tess on the bottle as well. I think that's really
Oh, thank
nice.
you.
Are you planning on making yourself a key part of the brand?
I think it's almost kind of happened slightly accidentally that I've become the face of the brand. And I think part of that is due to other brands that I really respect have very strong founders and often female founders. And I often think that people like to buy from people. And it's going back to that kind of brand loyalty piece. If I feel like I know the story and I know who's behind it, I'm more inclined to probably buy from them than another brand that I know nothing about. So it comes, I guess, with pros and cons. I sometimes find it a bit strange. I can buy, the brand's still tiny, but sometimes I'll go somewhere and people will recognize me from like an ad or something and they'll be like, oh, I feel like I know you. But I also, yeah, I think, there's a lot of competition coming into the space and I think it's important if you can, yeah, tell your story. And I think it's a good way to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree with that. The core values that I get looking at All Dressed Up and thinking flavor is definitely really important, and being all natural is really important as well. Is that fair? And are there any other core values you think?
Yeah, they're two very big ones for us. So that's great that you've got two of them. The other ones, I guess we would say, are convenience. So by nature of kind of being in the bottle format, that's kind of a nod to my like chefing background. Kind of what we spoke about earlier. Like it's as good, if not better, than something you can make yourself, but in a more convenient um, format. And then we really pride ourselves on like being joyful. So, that's how we show up as a team. That's how we want to come across on socials, any kind of interaction that anyone has with the brand. Like, I really want it to be a joyful experience, as well as creating like joyful content and making people have more joyful meals. So, like, that really kind of overarches kind of how we show up as a team and how I want the brand to be reflected. And then we kind of have our own, personal values that sit within the brand. But yeah, you kind of like nailed it in terms of the brand's USPs and the values that we stand for.
Yeah, I think that thing about joy is really important. And what is coming together to have a meal about if it's not about enjoying that time?
Yeah, exactly. And I think, gone are the days where, people are settling for a meal deal for lunch. People actually really care about what they're eating. And if we can play a part of that and people can get genuinely really excited to dress up their meals and create better meals and more delicious, more nourishing, colourful salads, then, that is a role that I'm very happy for us to play.
Yeah, I I hope you're right, and I kind of think that is right. But at the same time, I see a lot of people who are sat at a table of four and they're all on their phones and not even really enjoying the meal or enjoying the time together, which I find mind blowing.
Yeah, no, I agree with you, and I can be guilty of the latter of being one of those people. But it's moments of joy, isn't it? Even if you are someone who's super busy and eating on the go, if you can have something more delicious and more exciting than an average meal deal, then it's like the small wins and the little moments of joy, which I think kind of all add up to actually a more fulfilled day.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I know we talked about your customer a little bit before, but I'd like to ask, do you think they are really health focused or are they more flavor focused?
I think predominantly they're more flavor focused. I think, we pride ourselves on flavor and being the best tasting salad dressing. And it's something that, we've worked really hard to create dressings that do taste great. So yeah, I would say predominantly we're more flavor focused than health focused. It is really important to have like the natural credentials and to use as few ingredients as possible, and for those ingredients to be ingredients that you can recognize. But yeah, I would definitely say the consumer is probably more bothered about the fact that it's like a great tasting product than, a super restrictive, healthy product.
There's a lot to be said for flavor. I just read the Dorito effect, and I've forgotten the guy's
I haven't
name.
had that.
Yeah, it's amazing. But basically, he says that your body will tell you what you need to eat. You just have to be led
Hmm.
by flavor. But things like Doritos have messed up our system so much that we kind of don't really understand what real flavor is.
Yeah, I mean, my mum is a big advocate for like intuitive eating. And it's all around like eating what you feel like. But as you say, like we live in a society where often that becomes so complicated because, we are surrounded by lots of food we think we want. But it was definitely how we grew up. If you felt ill and you wanted a bowl of pasta, then you should eat a bowl of pasta. Like your body is so clever. And if you can really tune in on that intuition, then that was always how we kind of grew up, kind of having a really like balanced but very unrestricted diet.
You should be allowed to enjoy yourself if you want a Mars bar
Totally.
or whatever.
And there are days where like you need a Mars bar. And you shouldn't feel bad for eating a Mars bar. It's not something you necessarily need every day. But yeah, I am a real firm believer in kind of following, yeah, that intuition as clearly as you can.
Yeah. When I was much younger than I am now, I'd had some time in Mexico and got
Mhm.
unbelievably bad food poisoning. And I was taking packets of Imodium and it wasn't doing
Oh,
anything.
yeah.
I somehow managed to get back to London, back home. And my mum made me like really strong black tea and lemon barley water or something like that. And within 24 hours, I was absolutely fine. And it has
Yeah.
always blown my mind that, I'd been to see the doctors out in Mexico and I'd taken the pills and the tablets. And actually, what worked was just the most simple, natural remedies.
Yeah, and often your body will crave that. So yeah, it's just being like tuned in to that, and that can become hard when we're surrounded by things which taste good that aren't good for us.
Yeah. Yeah. A question around the packaging. Did you ever think about putting it in glass or has it always been plastic?
Yeah, very much at the beginning, it was like a consideration of plastic versus glass. But I think having worked in restaurants and having worked as a private chef, we wouldn't dream of putting a sauce in glass. One, because it would break, and that was just kind of a hazard, but more so because you can't control it. You pour a glass thing, it goes everywhere, it's messy. I guess there was an element of like wanting to do it differently, wanting to disrupt and create something that didn't just look like what had existed there for the last 20, 30 years. So yeah, there were two folds to it. One was that I felt that it was more innovative and it made more sense kind of from a convenience point of view to put it in a squeezy bottle. And two, plastic is cheaper than glass. You've got less risk in terms of it being shipped and damaged. And yeah, doing something different. So it was all of those three factors. But we had pushback initially from farm shops saying, glass is perceived as more premium, and they didn't think that consumers would trade up when it was in plastic. But look at every olive oil now. Every olive oil has been put in a squeezy bottle because of the grazer effect. So when we did it with dressings, it was quite innovative. Like now, there's other dressing brands that are in squeezy bottles. It's less of a USP, but it does make sense in terms of the application and how you use them.
Being able to sell at a premium price point and yet in plastic and it still seemed to work. Customers must have been really excited about the flavor, having the convenience, all of the
And I
above.
think it makes them feel chefy. We had so much feedback when we first launched the range that people were like, "I love the bottle. It makes so much sense. I can control how much I use. I can feel like I'm kind of a chef." And I think it's good facts. Their slogan is something like "Unlock your inner chef," and that is because of the squeezy effect. So yeah, I think there's definitely a kind of a part that's played within that.
Yeah. I've got loads of those bottles, with the nozzle on top from when I had a food business. And I know exactly what you mean about just being able to put anything in there and just measure it out easily. But it's also really good that your bottles come in that packaging because then you can just keep it, wash it out and keep it.
Exactly. And they're fully recyclable. So yeah, there is a lot of pros to a squeezy.
When you started out, when you were selling to friends or giving to friends, did you change the design, the packaging design when you started to go into retailers?
Yeah, we've actually changed our packaging, our sort of label. The actual core packaging of the bottle and the nozzle has always stayed the same, but the label itself has changed three times. So at the very beginning, it's very much like the core look and feel is very similar. It's kind of moved slightly along. I say it's probably like having like your first child. It's you think it's beautiful, and actually you look back and like, oh god, no, it wasn't very beautiful. And it was quite childish in terms of like the font we used, the illustrations we used. And we did a lot of feedback and kind of survey at the beginning, and people were saying, I love the product, it tastes great, but it doesn't look like a premium brand. It's not something, would sit proudly in my kitchen. So then the second version I did was with the same designer, and we tried to take all of the elements that we liked about the first version, but just make it feel more premium. And then we did another variation last summer before we launched into Waitrose. And that was again just trying to elevate it, stand out on shelf, make the colors pop. But all three variations have been quite close. Like the logo has stayed the same. The core color palette has stayed the same. It's just we've tried to kind of elevate it and premiumize it as much as we can.
Yeah. And did you notice every time you made a design change, a bump in sales or attention?
I think it's really difficult to kind of be able to really clearly see your return on investment because we're also changing loads of other things at the same time. When we had our second brand phase, I would say it did make a big difference because it did look a lot more premium. And I would say our rate of sale significantly increased, but then so did our distribution. With our most recent rebrand, it's quite subtle. Like a lot of people wouldn't even necessarily notice it. but I think it has edged us further to kind of where we want to be. Um, but then, we've been working really hard in terms of like honing in our mission and improving our social content, and we've been doing more marketing and trade marketing. So it's quite hard to say like that one thing has made our sales kind of go through the roof. But I think, it all plays a part, and you've just got to make sure that everything you're sort of pushing forward in the right direction.
Like going into Waitrose, was it something that they drove? Did they drive the last change?
No, they didn't actually. It was purely driven predominantly by me. I was like, we've been given a fantastic opportunity to be listed in Waitrose, and I want to give it our best possible shot. And I don't think our current packaging is as good as it can be. So it was more led from me trying to give the brand the best possible reason to make sense of what it was, and for the ingredients to be clearer and pop on shelf so that people would be more inclined to pick it up and try it.
Yeah. Yeah, it always blows my mind the amount of money that can be spent on a redesign, and then you might look at it and go, okay, give me a clue here. What is the change? Because it's so
Yeah.
subtle. But these things do play on a deeply subconscious level often. When you just how that brand looks to you on
Yeah.
the shelf, and is it enough for you just to grab it or walk by?
Yeah, definitely. And I do look at our V1, V2 branding now, and I'm like, oh, that looks terrible. Whereas most people won't even, notice the change, but they might not picked up V2, if that makes sense. They might not be conscious there's a change, but it's not as visual or appealing or aesthetic as the latest version.
Yeah. Also, personally, I love a die cut label as well. So,
Oh, thank you.
I
We
think
like a die cut label too.
yeah, I think that always makes a really big difference. But my guess is that probably if you haven't got a design or packaging design background, maybe it doesn't even occur to you that it's a possibility. But I think it really makes a big difference in how something is perceived.
Definitely. And I think it's a real balance of like trusting your instincts and trusting a professional designer, because often designers will tell you to go in a different direction. And I think that can be really difficult as a founder who doesn't have a design background to know whether you're making the right decision for the brand or whether you should trust an expert. And I think that can become difficult as the brand evolves.
With your values of flavor, being all natural, is there a limit to how big all dressed up can go, do you think, while sticking to those values?
Yeah, I mean, my view on it is that it's a category that has a huge amount of room for a shake up. The salad dressing category in itself is valued about 44 million, which is relatively small, but salads are valued over 2 billion in the UK. So, I think there's a huge opportunity there. And I think, more people care about ingredients and moving away from things that are super processed. And I think, take pippin nut and peanut butter as a case study. I don't know what the size of the category was when they launched, but they've proven that people wanted to trade up. They wanted better. They didn't want to use palm oil. They really stood strongly for that. And then they've diversified into other products, and what a success story. So yeah, I do feel there's a huge amount of potential within dressings and further diversification in that space.
Yeah. Have you got any new products on the horizon or new categories that you'd like to go into?
We have got two new dressing flavors which are launching in spring,
Okay.
which we're really excited about. In terms of diversification, we don't have anything in the midst at the moment. I think, it can become quite confusing to consumers if you try and be too many different things too early. But then you want to stay ahead of the game and think about future MTD pipelines. So at the moment, just dressings, but, might be a different story in 6 months' time.
Yeah. Okay. One last question. Do you have a favorite from the range?
It's difficult because I do actually genuinely use them all the time. I would say probably the miso sesame is my favorite because it's the most versatile. It probably took the longest to develop in terms of kind of getting the balance of flavors right. And we do have a real kind of like cult love following for it. People who try it generally really do love it. So probably for all of those reasons, it's my favorite. But yeah, I do have a soft spot for all of them.
Is that the bestseller? Is there a clear bestseller?
Yeah, the miso sesame and the tahini lime are our two like bestsellers, but yeah, quite strongly the bestsellers are those two.
That's really interesting because I feel those are the kind of flavors that are quite, let's say, fashion flavor forward.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it shows that like our customer and the people buying into the brand are quite adventurous. We thought that the house would perform really well because it's just, it's grounds the range. But I think it shows that our shoppers are very foodie and they want like flavor forward ingredients and profiles that are exciting.
Yeah, that's the sort of paradox, I think, where we talked about it earlier, but the idea that the people looking for these um, dressings for the range clearly like good food, and I would imagine they like cooking for themselves, and yet they're buying something pre-prepared, which is amazing that you're able to provide something like that to a bunch of foodies who probably cook for themselves a lot.
Yeah, it's something we're super excited about. Like when we did a recent survey, we interviewed 100 people. Over 50% of them weren't buying pre-made salad dressing. So they're all incremental to the category. And they're all people who weren't buying into it because they didn't like the flavor of shop bought dressings or they had too many additives or preservatives, or they preferred their own, but they're now buying into it all dressed up. So I think that was like really encouraging, exciting data for us to see.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Brilliant, Tess. Thank you so much. That was amazing.
Pleasure. Thank you for having me on.